But what I will show you is the results from this National Center for Education Statistics document that assessed the percentage of children who now believe it's government's responsibility to take on economic concerns. Keeping prices under control. 84.2% of America's ninth graders now believe it's government's responsibility to set prices. The curriculum is working. Providing industries with the support they need to grow. Supporting business. 66.2%. The curriculum is working. Guaranteeing a job for anyone who wants one. Government's responsibility. The curriculum is working. And finally, reducing differences in income and wealth among people. 63.5% of ninth graders, tomorrow's citizens, voters, and government officials now believe it is government's responsibility to redistribute wealth. The curriculum is working. It tells us that the assessments were not designed to measure knowledge of a particular country's government, but were developed instead to measure knowledge and understanding of key principles that are universal across democracies. Are these the key principles of democracy? I think not. Not the American version of a republic, by the way. Read Article 4, Section 4 of the Constitution. Guaranteeing a republican form of government, not a democracy. John Adams called democracy the devil's very own form of government because he said the most famous democratic vote in all of history was crucify Christ. And the government even knew he was innocent. That's democracy. That's why our founders were afraid of it. Who was the first man to call for worldwide democracy? Karl Marx. Did you know that? Well, how could kids think this way? Look at the national standards of economic curriculum. By the way, the voluntary mandatory national standards. Standard 16 says, students will understand that there is an economic role for government to play. Governments often define and protect property rights. Ooh, there's a tricky one. See, they got the word protect in there, but who defines the property rights? Government. If government defines property rights, there is no such thing as private property. Most government policies also redistribute income. This is true, but it's supposed to be a good thing here. Who wrote these standards? Well, the National Council on Economic Education and the Economics International program. These were to be based on a consensus process. Well, again, how can ninth graders be so easily convinced? You know, a famous man named Lenin once said, take away a people's heritage and they're easily persuaded. Easily persuaded. So the very first subject that fell was history. The National History Standards tells us one of the most common problems is the compulsion students feel to find the one right answer. Or worse yet, they rush to closure reporting back as self-evident truths the facts or conclusions presented in the text or document. Now think about that for a minute. What would our founders say to this? You know, those are the guys who talked about self-evident truth. This is the worst problem a child could have, reporting back as self-evident truths. You see, the principles of the Declaration of Independence stand in the way of this entire agenda, so it must be eradicated. You know those 7 principles of the Declaration, don't you, all by heart? National sovereignty, natural law, self-evident truth. All men are created equal. By the way, he didn't mean the gender, he meant mankind, both male and female. Creator-given unalienable rights that included life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness or property. Government's purpose to secure these rights, and finally, popular sovereignty, the consent of the governed. These are the principles that stand in the way of sustainable development. So this is the big debate in Minnesota right now. Because of the 30,000 strong Maple River Education Coalition, we have now repealed, been the only state to repeal the Goals 2000 curriculum. The debate now shifts to the replacement principles. We managed to get all of the Declaration principles in the House version passed, failed in the Senate. When it came out of conference committee, they were gone. When the chairman of the Joint Committee was asked why they weren't there, here was his response. The Declaration has no legal status in defining people's rights. None whatsoever. He repeated that on the floor of the Senate, by the way. But see, I'm a collector of rare founding era books. This is an original John Quincy Adams explaining the connection between these two great documents. John Quincy Adams put it this way. He said that the virtues which had been infused into the Constitution of the United States was no other than the concretion of those abstract principles which had been first proclaimed in the Declaration of Independence, namely the self-evident truths of the natural and unalienable rights of man, and the dissolvent sovereignty of the people, always subordinate to a rule of right and wrong and always responsible to the supreme ruler of the universe for the rightful exercise of that sovereign power. He went on to say, this was the platform upon which the Constitution of the United States has been erected. Its virtues, its republican character consisted in its conformity to the principles proclaimed in the Declaration of Independence. Folks, we celebrate the birthday of this nation on July 4th, not August 7th. That's because the Constitution was the working papers that put in place the principles contained in the Declaration.